following video footage was captured live at a rare Dr. Schulze public appearance. Dr. Schulze was told that without open heart surgery, he would be dead by age 20. Instead, he healed himself of his life-threatening heart deformity and of other incurable injuries. He then made it his life's work to help others have healing miracles too. Over 50,000 people worldwide have followed Dr. Schulze's natural healing programs. Many have healed themselves of so-called killer and incurable diseases. Because his patients dared to heal themselves of cancer, AIDS, diabetes, arthritis, heart disease, Alzheimer's, and other diseases that medicine declares incurable, his clinic was forced to close, and he now lives in hiding. Dr. Schulze is a very dangerous man to doctors and drug companies, but to you, he just might save your life.
Why are you so passionate? Why are you so excited? What is this enthusiasm you have? So let me tell you where it came from and how I got it. When I was 11 years old, had a wonderful life, fairy tale life. Mom and dad, very poor, but they loved the heck out of me and my brother and had a wonderful life. But when I was 11 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night. I heard a horrible noise. I ran in. My mother was crying. She was on the telephone, and my dad was screaming. And I got in bed, because that's where I always went when I felt unsafe, was into my parents' bed. And I held my dad, and he was crying and gasping for breath. I remember he had sweat. His whole body was sweating. Then he threw up on me, and he was gasping. And my mother was crying, trying to get a doctor on the phone, because he had been under doctor's care. And he was screaming, and then he lost bladder control, and then he lost bowel control. And I held him for 3 hours, and he looked at me in the eyes, and he said, the last thing he said was, he goes, "I'm dead." And he slumped over. And I'll never forget that. That was my first experience with mortality. I couldn't believe it. This was my dad. And to watch him die in such a horrible fashion at 11. And you know, only a few years later, when I was 14, the same thing happened to my mom. She died of a massive heart attack. And at 16, I was in trouble. I started having pains in my chest. I didn't understand it. And I started having pains in my jaw. I thought I was having tooth problems. And then the pains were radiating down my left arm. And one day, the pains got really great, and then I saw my vision come in, and I fell over and passed out. And it got to where I was passing out almost once a day, and then once or twice a day. And it got to the point where I was falling over about 3 times a day, and I knew I was in big trouble. And I went to the doctors. And I went to the hospital and the cardiac specialist, and the doctor said to me, "We better do some tests." So they did stress tests and cardiograms and x-rays and everything you could do at that time. And the doctor came back in that room. He had a very gray look on his face, very sad, very scary. I think he was trying to stimulate my immune system. And he said, "You have a very grave condition." I thought, grave, does that mean that's where I'm headed? Love that terminology. He said, "You're very seriously ill." He goes, "You have deformed valves in your heart." And I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "Well, what you're feeling is because your heart chambers are flooding at the wrong time." And he said, "You need to have surgery." And I thought, wait a minute, there's got to be a lot of other things I could do. And he goes, "If you don't have corrective surgery on these valves, by the time you're 19 or 20, you'll be dead, because there's no way this heart, the way it's flooding and it can't pump the blood, could pump the blood to an adult body. And being that you're 16, that's how you're surviving." So immediately I'm thinking, well, there must be other things. And I thought, what about my Aunt Hattie? See, I had an Aunt Hattie. She was really my great aunt when I was a kid. And all my grandparents were dead, but my Aunt Hattie survived because she was crazy, because she never drank tap water, ate her vegetables that she grew herself in the back. You know, she was nuts. And when we got sick, she'd grind up all sorts of weeds and stuff them down my brother and I's face, and we'd try to kick at her. She was an herbalist. We called her a witch. But you know, we always got better. And so I said to the doctor, "Do you think my Aunt Hattie can help?" That's what he did. He just laughed at me. He just laughed at me. And I said, "Well, you know, I had bronchial pneumonia once, and she had me better in 2 days." I said, you know, and I went on about Aunt Hattie, and I saw his eyes go off. And I said, "Well, There must be something. What about exercise? I know I don't exercise a lot, but I'm willing to exercise. I'm willing to exercise a lot. What about eating different? I'd seen health food stores starting to open up, and I heard about that. And they tested my cholesterol that day, and it was over 300, my cholesterol. I was trying to pump mud through my veins and arteries. I didn't know. And he said, listen, listen, listen. There is nothing that can help you except surgery. And they explained the surgery to me, and it was horrifying, cutting my ribs in half and taking a jack and jacking apart and sticking a knife in my heart. But he convinced me there was nothing else to do. So what are you going to do when your doctor says that? So I admitted myself to the hospital, and I sat in my room depressed, and they gave me drugs to take. And on my wing were all the other young people with bad hearts. So I got to meet them, and I met a real nice guy. His name was Bob. I'll never forget him. Wonderful man. And Bob and I became friends. You need a friend when someone's going to take a saw to you. And we became friends, and Bob was scheduled for his same surgery before me. The week before, I remember he had his surgery. The doctor came into my office with that horrified look on his face and told me that Bob died during the surgery. And I don't know what this felt was. I thought I was having a heart attack, but it was fear. And it started in my toes and came all the way up to my head. I felt like I was going to lose bladder and bowel control. And I thought, now wait a minute. Dad died, Mom died, Bob died. Who's next? It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. So I said, okay, no problem. He shut the door, and I was like, I got my clothes on, and I was gone. And I went down the road, and I just started telling everybody about my problem. I figured there's got to be answers out there. I mean, when you start thinking about taking that saw out of the garage and cutting yourself in half and sticking knives in your heart, I thought I'd rather drink battery acid mixed with donkey crap. I mean, you couldn't come up with the torture that I wouldn't do. So I said to everybody, what can I do? I got this heart. And the first person I ran into said, well, I think if you eat less red meat, it's better for your heart. And I had kind of heard that, but I thought it was some kind of anti-German group. Because, you know, I had blood for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert, and, a little sugar thrown in. But we never ate any of that green stuff on the plate. We'd scrape that off and give it to the dog, and he wouldn't eat it either. There was always blood in my plate. And I thought, to stop that, I mean, that makes you strong. That makes you healthy. So I had to learn about my food program, and we're going to talk about food a lot later. And then I had to learn about cleansing and detoxification. And I already knew how to change the oil on a 1950 Ford, but I had no idea how to change the oil on this thing. And that was new. And I had to learn about moving my body. I had to move my body to be healthy. And I had to learn about expressing myself. You know, love. I learned that you cannot have healthy organs in your body if you have negative tapes running here. And if you want to have a healthy heart, you better learn how to give love and receive love, because until you do, that heart cannot be healed. There's negative and positive emotions that will kill or cure every organ in your body. And I had to learn that. And it took me about 3.5 years on this program that I put together in a hodgepodge way, just doing anything and everything. Walked in the health food store and I said, what do I do? And they said, sunflower seeds. Okay, give me 100 pounds. I mean, I did it all. 3.5 years later, I went back to the doctor and I said, I think I'm well. And he didn't even remember me. Then he got my file and he goes, oh yeah. He goes, you left the hospital. And I said, yeah. I said, check me out. And so they did electrocardiograms and x-rays and stress tests and all different cardiograms. And he came back in that room and he had that same horrified look on his face. And he goes, I just don't believe this. I don't believe this. He obviously was not a believer. I don't believe this. And he was shaking his head. He said, if I didn't have the test results, if I didn't have the pictures of this deformed heart, I would have never believed it. But he said, your heart's perfect. Your heart's fine. There's no deformity in those valves. It's like someone put new valves in your heart. And I said, wow. I said, I knew that. And he said, how did you know that? And I said, well, listen to what I did. And I started telling him about some of my Aunt Hattie's routine. And then I started telling him about the carrot juice and some of the things. And I could see him writing, obviously, delusional, mildly schizophrenic. I could see him writing. He didn't care how I healed myself. That wasn't his business. That wasn't his job. His job was knives and baboon hearts and drugs and nitroglycerin. That was his job. This wasn't his job. He goes, you've had a miracle. And I said, yes, I know. But I said, I did a lot of work to make that miracle happen. God helps those who help themselves, right? I did a lot of work to make that miracle happen. He had a very, very shocked look on his face. So I left. Now I'm going to skip a little ahead in my timeline here so you understand about this passion and enthusiasm. Because a few years later in naturopathic school, I was making an ointment with a big 5-gallon pot of oil. And I walked out of the room and left it on high by accident. And when I came back, the oil was boiling and in flames. And I had taped all over the walls in this lab little herbal formulas that I was working on, about 1,000 of them, and they were all in flames too. And so it was like, emotionally, I just couldn't believe it. I thought, I got to get this pot out. And when I got close to it, it fell off and covered this hand. And my hand immediately burnt right up into a little ball. And it was on fire. I was watching it flame. And I quickly put it under water and wrapped a towel and doused it out and sat down. And I thought, uh-oh. I've done some pretty good damage here. And I opened it up and I couldn't get my hand open, and I looked and it was really badly burnt. And I was in shock. I could feel it. And I thought, natural healing, I'll be able to fix this. I was a believer, I thought. After a couple days, I realized I had done some tremendous damage. And then your friends come in and they always help you by telling you that you could die of infection. You better go see a doctor now. See, we need the doctor now. And I thought, I better go see a doctor now. And I went to a friend of mine, a friend who was a medical doctor, and he said, this is a really bad burn. He said, you have to go to a burn specialist. I got a friend. You go see him right now. He deals mainly with hands and fingers. This is the top burn guy. Go see him. I knocked on his door, went in his office, and he said, this is pretty serious, did some tests. And he said, well, he goes, you're in for some work here. There's a lot of trouble. And I said, what's that? And he said, this is a 4th-degree burn. I had never heard of a 4th-degree burn. I said, what is that? And he said, you are burnt all the way to the bone. All levels of your skin are burnt and gone. And I said, well, it doesn't look that bad. And he said, look, took a tweezers, and right here where you see this pigmentation, he picked all the flesh off all the way down to the bone. All the little tendons and ligaments gone, little muscles, all flesh gone. I could see my bone. And I'll tell you, when you see your bone, it's a pretty lightning experience. I felt that fear come on. I felt like I was going to faint. My body started trembling. And he said, look here. And he put this clamp on my thumb, and he pulled it off like a cooked chicken. My whole casing, my nail, everything. Wow, this guy was trying to heal me? I said, my hand. And he said, that's 4th degree. And he said, you need massive skin grafts. And I said, well, can't. And I started telling the story about my heart and my Aunt Hattie and my natural healing experience. And he said, no, 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 no. He goes, you have no skin. Not the 1st level, not the 2nd level, not the 3rd. You have no skin. It's gone. You have bone. He goes, you cannot grow skin cells from bone cells. It started making sense. He said, you can't grow skin from thin air. That started making sense. He scared me. He said, we're going to have to sew skin onto your hand. And after about a half hour, I thought, sew it on. Just give me a hand. I can't take this. Give me a hand. And he said, okay. He convinced me. And he said, will you take your pants off? I thought, well, that's kind of a weird request. I mean, I was in Hollywood, but I thought, take my pants off. So well, you do what your doctor says. I take my pants down, and he puts his hand on my butt, and he goes, well, this is where we're going to take the skin from. I thought they had like a sod farm out there or something where they grew this stuff. Or I thought when you died in an auto accident, they just kind of skinned you and then they put it on somebody else. It's bad enough to have a burn-off hand, and now he was going to carve this beautiful butt of mine? I don't think so. And that's again when that natural healing bell went off, and I thought, here's another doctor telling me that my body and God and nature won't fix this, right? So I left, and I went home, and I worked, and I worked, and in 30 days I had skin over this hand. They said it was impossible. And I went back to that doctor, and I said, look. And he was, you could see it was like he had a physical shock from a battery pack under his chair. He went, and I said, look, 30 days, I got skin on this hand. And he said, I have never, ever seen that in my 30 years of practicing medicine. And I said, you've never seen it because all you do is sew people's asses onto their hand, right? I mean, how can you see the power of nature and God and your own healing ability if you don't give it a chance? This is about trusting and believing again, right? And I started to tell him how I did that. And I could see him writing, insane, mildly schizophrenic, same thing. He didn't want to hear it. I had some good stories about this, about crying and pooping and all these things. He didn't want to hear it. About love, and when after a week I had to learn how to love this hand again, because I was holding it out there thinking, I'm fine, it's just this hand that's all messed up. And I had to learn how to love this hand again and give it some kisses to fix it. He didn't want to hear about the kisses either. Now let me skip a little bit further ahead in my timeline. Part of my exercise program, I thought, I want to ski. I saw a Warren Miller video. I wanted to hit the slopes. So I took lessons, and I love lessons because I want to learn. Took a lot of ski lessons, got pretty good, and joined the NASCAR amateur races. And I was at Deer Valley, Utah, on one of the amateur races. I thought for sure I could win one of the medals. It wasn't going to be gold. But I thought, all I got to do is get to the bottom of this hill faster than anybody else. How hard could that be? And I'm going down, and I'm doing the bamboos and hitting the bamboos, and then got one turn left, and I'm looking at the numbers. I shouldn't have been looking there. I am on my downhill ski. I got my full weight forward. I'm feeling great. That's what I heard. Just this big. Next thing I woke up, I was in the hospital. And there was a doctor holding my leg, and it was like this, dangling. And I thought, uh-oh, had a lot of snow around me. Turned into a human snowball. That's the story I heard. He said, you have really destroyed your knee. He was trying to build my immune system again, I think. He said, it's bad. He goes, it's so bad, we don't even want to look at it. He goes, I'm going to splint you, and you get back to Los Angeles and go see the best orthopedic group in the world. They're right there in LA. They work on a lot of athletes. Go see them. I thought, okay. Came back to LA, went to see the guy. They took an x-ray, and he said, you've done it. He said, it doesn't get much worse. He said, you have torn out your medial collateral ligaments all on the inside of your knee. He goes, they're gone. He said, you've torn up all your interior cruciates right here in the middle of your knee. He goes, they're gone. It's spaghetti. He goes, you've torn your cartilage, you've torn your meniscus. He said, there's just a little skin and some outside ligaments that are just holding your leg on. He said, it's gone. He said, this is about as bad as it gets. He goes, you need to get surgery immediately. We're going to admit you right now. I thought, well, wait a minute. Isn't there something? Maybe my Aunt Hattie's got something for here. I don't know. I started telling him about my hand and my heart, and he said, I understand that, but this is different. He said, this is a physical damage to your knee. You need to have it surgically repaired. And I thought, well, wait a minute. What about all the love? I'm going to love this knee and herbs and juices and all the things I'm going to do. He goes, look, he goes, I'm not going to kid around with you. He goes, I deal with injuries like this all the time. He goes, it's bad. It's real bad. He goes, you know, if you don't get it fixed immediately, there won't be nothing left to fix. He said, in fact, these ligaments are so broken and so far apart and so destroyed, we're going to have to take the ligaments out of a dead body and sew them in your leg. And now I was in the room with Dr. Frankenstein. That's when that bell went off again. It was like the butt to the hand, you know, the saw here. Now they're going to take cadaver ligaments and sew them in me. And I thought, whoa, if I can build a heart, I can build a hand. I said in 30 days, I'm going to have a new knee. I was pretty cocky. Walked out of his office, and in 30 days, I didn't have anything. This thing didn't work at all. But in 60 days, I was limping. And in 90 days, I was walking without a limp. And here I am today. I never could tap dance. But here I am today with a new knee. I went back to his office to show him my new knee. And he said, "This is a miracle." And I said, "Yes, it is." I said, "But I did a lot of work to make this happen." And he said, "Well, I have never, ever seen anything like this happen before." Sounded just like his brother in crime, the guy who wanted to sew my butt and my hand together. I hope he was going to separate them afterwards. Would have looked a little weird walking around like this. And the first doctor that said I'd be dead by 20. If I listened to the doctors, I'd be dead. That would look pretty bad. I wouldn't have any skin on this hand, and I couldn't walk if I listened to the doctors. Thank God I had a natural healing filter in here, because I listened to my inner voice that said, "Don't do this. Don't do this." So what I'd like to do is explain to you about what I call the faulty mathematics of medicine. Now, the handout for that is near the beginning of your book, but you don't need it. You know, handouts, some people like to look at them, some people don't. But the handout is on page 8, called The Faulty Mathematics of Medicine. I'd like to go over that just for a few minutes here. One of the first things a doctor does when you go to a doctor is called a diagnosis. This diagnosis is done to discover what is wrong with you. There's always something wrong with you, because the book that we go by, or the model, it's called Gray's Anatomy. Gray's Anatomy is a book of the perfect anatomy of the human body. And there's books on the perfect physiology. And all of you in here, unfortunately, are imperfect. And so you are not going to look like that book. And whenever any of us is analyzed compared to that anatomy and physiology perfection, we fall short of it. Therefore, we need some treatment. And so this is a diagnosis first. Well, what's wrong with us? Why don't we look like this perfect model in Gray's Anatomy? Well, that model doesn't exist, isn't a living, breathing person. But that's what we're compared to. So we get a diagnosis. This is what's wrong with you. I have heart valves that are deformed. I have no skin on my hand. I have a destroyed knee. Then they give you what is called a prognosis. Prognosis means telling the future. What's going to happen? Well, you have deformed heart valves. You're going to be dead by 20. You have no skin on your hand. You better sew your butt to it, or you're never going to have anything but a skeleton there. You have a destroyed knee. We better take some dead body parts and sew them in, or you're not going to walk. That's what a prognosis is. That's diagnosis and prognosis. But there's one thing the doctor forgets to tell you. And that's what's in the middle, right here. This missing factor. And of course, this is you. This is what's wrong with you. You have hairy cell leukemia. What's going to happen? Go home and clean out the garage so your children don't have to do it when they have the garage sale, because you're going to be dead in 6 months. That's the prognosis. Diagnosis, prognosis. But they never took you into consideration. You know why? Because they already think they know you. They think you are the average American. The average American that they think you are eats a low nutrition, high fat food program. The average American has a diet high in nutritionally depleted food. The average American drinks 300 soft drinks a year. The average American eats 170 pounds of white refined sugar a year. The average American eats 400 candy bars a year. The average American eats 500 donuts a year. And since I don't eat any, somebody's eating 1,000. The average American will stuff 12 entire 3,000-pound cows into their mouth and down in their gut and try to poop them out in their lifetime. 12 entire cows. The average American will take 6 entire pigs, try to chew them up and swallow them and crap them out. The average American will take 3,000 chickens and other birds and put them in their mouth, and another 3,000 aliens from under the sea into their mouth and chew them up. The average American will drink 30,000 quarts of milk and pass this all through their digestive system. Whew! That's a job. Is that you? I don't think so. Average American has 2 to 4 bowel movements a week. According to my figures, that means they are 70,000 poops short in their life compared to me. Woo! Talk about full of it. The average American gets very little exercise, is overweight, has hypercholesterolemia or too much cholesterol, has hypertension, high blood pressure, cholesterol level of 200 or above. The average American takes over 30,000 aspirin and other drugs in their life, and over 20,000 over-the-counter drugs, and another 2,000 gallons of alcohol. Whew! Now that's a program. It's not our program, but it's a program. Now if that is you, and the doctor says you have deformed heart valves, you'll be dead by 20, you know what's going to happen at 20? You're going to die. If that is you and the doctor says you have no skin on your hand and you need to sew your butt to your hand or anything else to your hand, you better sew it. And if that is you and the doctor says you have no ligaments in your knee, it's wrecked, it's gone, you'll never walk again, you better sew anything onto that knee if that's what's going to get you to walk again. If that's you. Because what these doctors say is absolutely correct. There's a book on it called the Manual. The doctors call it their Bible. And every doctor has that book, and it's a book of diagnosis and prognosis. And it's published by Merck, Sharp, and Dohme, one of the largest drug companies in the world, part of the Dow Industrials. You see Merck traded. It's written by an international team of medical doctors, the best from all around the world. So these people are right if you are the average American. And this is what they're expecting. The average American. That person who takes those 3,000 cows and gets them all the way through and hopefully out. That's what they are expecting. So when they say you have leukemia, you'll be dead in a year, they're considering that you're the candy bar donut eater with a high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and all those other horrible things. But what about if you are not the average American? What about if you decide to take responsibility, I know that's a dirty word, responsibility for yourself and make changes in your life? Positive changes in your life, that you decide not to eat necessarily everything that's in front of you, that you don't stop at McDonald's and maybe you stop at the health food store, and you decide to do some periodic cleansing and cleanse out your internal organs and get your exercise program going and you decide to start changing some of the tapes you learned here. You know, my mother said you can't always get what you want, and when she died, the Rolling Stones said you can't always get what you want. I heard it all my life, right? Negative affirmations. We start changing that, and you're not the average American anymore. And if you decide not to be the average American, then these books are the biggest books of lies ever published. And do not go to a doctor. Don't go to a hospital, because they have no idea whatsoever of what's going to happen to you. You're going to be considered insane, schizophrenic, a miracle, because they have no idea. There are no books written about what happens when you have leukemia and you decide to get the juicer going, you get the wheatgrass juice out, you get the carrot juice out, you start running, stretching, cleansing, liver flushing, bowel cleansing, new attitude. There's no books on that. Medicine knows nothing about that. They study nothing about it. They've learned nothing about it. They know nothing about it. So, don't go to a doctor or a hospital if you want to be well. I guess that's the message here. Dr. Mendelsohn, and I'm a big fan of his. Dr. Mendelsohn was a pediatrician. Who knows Dr. Mendelsohn knows of him? Yeah, we have some of his books in the back. Great man. He was one of the nation's leading pediatricians. Practiced for 40 years with children, loved kids. He was head of the American Medical Association's licensing board for the state of Illinois. He was chief of staff of one of the largest hospitals in Chicago. He started the federal program Head Start, trying to get kids healthy. And after all these years of practice, he went, uh-oh, I think we're killing people. I don't think we're getting anybody well. And he wrote his first book called Confessions of a Medical Heretic. And he says right on the back, if you are sick, if you are ill, do not go to a doctor or a hospital. Statistically, your odds will be better if you do nothing. Nothing. Isn't that amazing? From one of the top guns of medicine, nothing. Now, what about if you do something? I know that's a radical thought, but what about if you do something? See, if you have a disease and you're the average American and you go to the doctor, I can tell you your future. They're probably going to kill or maim you. If you have a disease and you do nothing, you'll live longer. That's what I saw with my patients. My patients that just let the tumors and the cancer grow and rot them outlived the people I knew that took the chemotherapy and did all the treatment. And there is no statistical evidence today that proves that chemotherapy works for anything. Here's a government report I have right here from the General Accounting Office of the United States. The United States' Statistical Investigation Department on breast cancer and chemotherapy, and they say right here, how is this possible? That is, what would explain our consistent finding that there is no observable improvement in breast cancer patient survival, even though the use of chemotherapy has increased rapidly in the last 10 years. It doesn't work. In fact, it makes you worse. So let's look at this again. You go to a doctor, your time is less. You do nothing, your time is more. But what about doing something? What about making some nice choices in here for this new, healthier you? For this new, healthier you. You know what happens? You saw it. You heard it right here. And I know many of you have some great stories. Because I got the new heart valves, and unless I'm dead, and unless this is heaven, I'm still ticking here. And the doctor said I'd be dead at 20, and I'm not. I'm alive, and I got the skin on the hand, and I got the new knee. This is why I have this enthusiasm and passion and excitement about natural healing. I watched my parents die at the hands of doctors, and I watched myself live at my own hands with my belief in nature and God. And now I've seen it with thousands and tens of thousands of people all around the world. And this week, you're going to hear a lot of great stories of miracle healings about them. about what I've experienced, and I know that I got some good ones right here among you, and I can't wait to hear them too. It always amazes me when people will even go to a doctor. It really amazes me. What's the prognosis for AIDS? Death, okay. So why do you go to a doctor when you have AIDS? Why would you go to someone that's just going to tell you you're going to die? Think about that. Now suppose our toilet back there really breaks today. Probably will. We call a plumber up and we say, you know, we need a new toilet. Can you come and fix our toilet? And the plumber goes, sure, I'll be right there. But I must warn you that every toilet I've ever put in my 45 years of being a plumber, within a week it breaks again. Would you say, hey, yeah, come on right over? I don't get it. Why would we go to a doctor when we know they're going to tell us we're dead? Why don't we go to someone that tells us we can live? Do you understand what I'm saying? And plus, with all we know now, which I'm going to share with you later even more than you know, about how powerful this tool is right here between our ears at healing our body, we would never let someone give us a death sentence. I say this is the biggest form of malpractice by medical doctors today, is telling people when they think they're going to die. How dare they do that? Yeah. So after I healed my heart, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life here. After I healed my heart, this is what I heard. Knock on my door. One of my friends said, I can't believe the story I heard about you and your heart. I said, it's true. Here I am. They said, do you think you could help my uncle? My uncle has heart disease. And I said, yeah, let's do it. I know the heart disease program, the Dr. Schulze heart disease program. I figured it out. We did the program. His uncle didn't have to have surgery. Got better. Next thing I heard another knock on the door. It was one of my relatives that had been diagnosed with cancer. Did the program. They went into remission. Oh, and it also worked for cuts and scrapes and all sorts of other things. What I learned is your body's incredible ability to heal itself. But I started getting a lot of knocks on the door. Pretty soon the knocks came from people I never met before. And I thought, well, you know, I would like to go to school and learn more about the body's ability to heal itself. And I had heard about a great doctor out here in California named Bernard Jensen, and some of you, I think, just came from hearing him. Wonderful. Yeah. What a wonderful, wonderful, beautiful man. And I went to Dr. Jensen's to study about natural healing. You know, first in New York, I followed a man around named Pavel Arola, who was an incredible natural healer from Europe, and boy, was he a butt kicker. That's when I really learned. Someone told me that sympathy comes between shit and syphilis in the dictionary. Now, I don't use a lot of four-letter words, but occasionally one slips out. I never saw sympathy get anybody well, but I saw a good kick in the butt do it just good. And I saw Pavo even wind himself up for him a few times, and he helped many people get well. And then I went out to Dr. Jensen's, but I had a problem. I had a 1960 Pontiac. It didn't run very well, barely got me across town. How was it going to get 3,000 miles to California? And I just prayed, and it happened. My radiator leaked so bad I had to stop every hour and let it cool down and put new water in, and my brother was with me, and it stopped leaking after about Oklahoma, and then I found out later he was putting his gum on the holes, and it must have fried them shut to some degree, because we get about 150 miles before the car sounded like it was going to blow up. Got all the way out to Dr. Jensen's. It cost $900 to do his entire training that summer. I had no money because I spent it all on gas to get there. I went into Oceanside, the town near where Dr. Jensen was. I went to a car lot and I said, what can I get for my car? And the guy says, the best I can give you is $900. Yes, thank you. I took my $900, I hitchhiked back to Dr. Jensen, I paid his wife the $900, and then it dawned on me while everybody else was going to their motel room. So I noticed when I went in his ranch that a dog was burrowing in the hedge at the front, and I thought, if the dog can do it, so can I. So for the months I stayed and worked with Dr. Jensen, and he still doesn't know it to this day, I burrowed myself into his hedge in the front and slept there. I showered with his hose, and boy was it cold, but that's hydrotherapy. And I borrowed some of his organic food from his backyard in his Hunza gardens, but I recycled it and gave back. And I learned more about the power of healing at Dr. Jensen's, seeing him at work with his beautiful, simple, loving understanding of natural healing and helping people get well. Boy, did I learn a lot. And I was willing to do anything to be there. And that's the point. I'm not just trying to tell you what a tough guy I am, but you gotta be tough if you want to be well. Natural healing can't be this fiddling around with a purple candle, okay, and maybe a little scented oil over here, because while you're fooling around with that, the doctors are sharpening those scalpels, they're boiling down the chemotherapy, and you go in and they're gonna cut your arm off. Do you know what I mean? We got to be like that in natural healing. We can't expect to just be fiddling. Oh, but now it's real serious. You got to go to a doctor. Why to a doctor? Because they know how to treat serious disease and illness with intensity. And sometimes natural healing has to be done with some intensity. So I learned a lot from Dr. Jensen. Caused a lot of trouble. I don't agree with Dr. Jensen on a number of things. I don't agree with anybody but myself on everything. He used a few things I didn't like veal joint broth and cod liver oil, and I used to go, ah! Make noises like that in the front row, and after the first day of class, he said, yo, I want to talk to you tonight. And I went and I thought, oh, I'm going to get a special session with the doc, and I got a good one. He told me, he looked at my eyes, he told me about myself, and he said, I can give you the best prescription you can have for your healing. I said, what's that? And he said, learn 1,000 jokes. And he told me to lighten up. He said, I'm giving you the best I got after 50 years, and you're sitting in the front room making noises. So I had a lot of learning to do at Jensen's, and I learned it. And he says, I want you to take everything I've learned and take it out there and make it better, improve on it, modernize it. He just didn't expect to live so long. He's still out there doing it. Then I went to a health show and met a man named Dr. John Christopher, America's greatest herbalist this century. And I went up to Dr. Christopher and I met him, and I saw more people than I ever saw at a health show. Almost 15,000 people tried to get in a room, tried to attack this man. And I got to speak with him for just a minute, and I said something, and he said, come up to Utah. And when I went to Utah, I started studying at his school, and in my first course, he pulled me out and had me teach with him. Because he saw that I had an understanding of natural healing. And I worked with him for a number of years, teaching at his school. What a wonderful natural healer. And again, many people think that he was mild, but I'm going to tell you some stories about him later that you'll appreciate. I got to do everything at his clinic. I remember once a boy came crippled, had its spine severed at birth from an early surgery to save it because of a heart problem, and they slipped with a scalpel and cut its spine, never walked, 12 years old, and I took that boy in his wheelchair and I wheeled him into the stream that was coming from a melted glacier out back of the school, and 3 hours later in that classroom with herbs and that stream treatment, his legs started twitching. Okay, I got to do some things like that at Dr. Christopher's. If Dr. Christopher was alive today, he'd be kicking my butt to turn up the intensity. That's the kind of man he was. He'd be kicking a few other butts for lessening the intensity. He was a great man. His son, David, used to leave during a lot of my classes. He said he was afraid that we were going to get sued. We never got sued. We did get thrown out of every place we ever held the school. But after I spent time with Dr. Christopher, that's when I realized that we could work on people that were really, really, really sick, diseases that I didn't even understand. And that's when I started working with more incurables. And for the last decade of my clinic out in Malibu, I worked almost specifically with people with degenerative disease that were told they were going to die by a doctor. So I always say that, you know, while I was in the clinic, most of my colleagues were writing books. I have a lot of friends in the herbal world, well, I used to. They have decided not to practice because practicing is very tough legally, especially if you start working with people with cancer, because you know that you can't be cured of cancer, diabetes, arthritis. That's the official law. There's no cure for those diseases according to medicine. Yeah, but see, I was getting those people well. I was giving them the information they needed and kicking them, and sure enough, they were getting well. So I was causing trouble. And that's why I got shut down. My clinic was like a speakeasy. The windows were blacked out. Poor Anisha came over from England to practice. She thought she was going to be pouring some lavender oil in a cobalt blue bottle. And I had people walking in that were so dead. I mean, we used to have rags filled with pus in the bathroom and blood and bottles of worms so big they looked like snakes. And the stench was so bad we used to have to burn our sage and spray our essential oils constantly just to get the smell of death out of my clinic. That's how bad it got, and people were coming from all over. Still today, people come and bring jars. I know my workers sometimes say, oh God, there's someone with a jar. I learned a lot of practical experience. I laugh at some of my colleagues. I tell them that they bottle herbal hypothesis in a bottle because you can't tell if it works. You got to work with people. What I learned and what I'm going to share with you here is what I learned in the clinic. You know, when Mr. Jones or Mrs. Smith come to you face to face and you give them something they're not getting better, you better fix it quick and get them better. And you don't learn that in the library, and you don't learn that on the computer database. You learn it working with people. And I know a lot of you have already done that, and I'm going to push you this week to do more of that. Sure, I alienate some people. Yes, I blow up some belief systems. But the healing of us and the healing of this planet is going to take place through our enlightenment and our illumination and our education. Does that make sense? Yes. And I'm not here to win any popularity contests, period. Okay, if I was, I'd be saying, oh, I think a hamburger once in a while is okay. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not here to be popular. I told all my crusaders, and I'll tell out of you, I will stop when nobody walks in this door to hear this message. That doesn't seem to be happening, does it? Okay? In fact, I am a wonderful believer in people in this country and all over the world. See, pharmaceutical companies and medical companies, they believe you're a bunch of stupid, dumb morons, and if you're not, they'll give you and turn you into one. Okay? That's who they believe you are. Oh, you're not going to stop eating the donuts and shoving 12 cows in your mouth. You'd rather have a coronary bypass surgery and pay $150,000 for it. That's who they think you are. Well, you know what? I know that's not true. I know the people in this country and around this world, and I travel all through it. And I find a lot of great people, a lot of loving people with a lot of common sense who are tired of getting ripped off by medicine and pharmaceuticals, who are tired of things not working, making them worse, and taking all their money. And they're sick and tired of it, and they've had it. That's who I find, and I know that America and the world is ready for this message.
The people you're about to see were not paid to tell their stories. They are just a few of the thousands of unsolicited testimonials from people just like you. People who were told that nothing but surgery, drugs, or chemotherapy could save their lives. People who were told that there was no cure for their disease, no hope of recovery, and some were even sent home to die. These people know firsthand the healing power of Dr. Schulze's programs, because against all odds, they created their own healing miracles, which they're going to tell you about in their own words. Dr. Schulze applauds their courage in coming forward and helping him with his natural healing crusade. He knows that by telling their healing stories, it will inspire others to take responsibility for their health, their own lives, and create healing miracles for themselves.
Jim Reinflesh from Arco, Idaho. I ran across this gal that practiced iridology at home, and I went to a class for her, paid her $75. And that's where she said she's got some of these Dr. Schulze tapes. Now, I was a little bit tight, and I thought, well, I don't want to buy those. I'm not sure, because there's so many things out there that are rip-offs. I mean, we looked about everything in the world, went through all these MLM companies, and they all say they got the best products. But what we found out is some of them work, some of them don't, and some of them are pretty good products. So I watched the tapes by Dr. Schulze, and I looked at that, and I watched them 2 or 3 times, and that's when I thought, there's got to be something here. With his dedication and the way he came across, I just had to try it. And so we started doing the things that he said, and I ordered some of the tinctures, and I really thought I was getting Alzheimer's, because I just could not think. I'd sit at my desk, and things just wouldn't come. And I started taking some of this brain, and it just like somebody took a veil off my head. It was just amazing. Now, the other thing that goes along with all this, about 6 years ago, I went over to visit my mother, and I knew she'd been sick, and she was sitting in a chair, just sobbing, just like this, just sobbing. Her feet hurt, she could not walk, I couldn't figure out what was the matter. So she went to the doctor, and they diagnosed her with diabetics, being a diabetic. So she went on insulin, about 30 units per day. And during the course of this, I picked up on the herbs and stuff, that Mom, try some of this stuff. And so we got her off insulin, believe it or not. And she had always been told that once you get on insulin, there's no way to get off of it. But she got off it in about 30 days. And she was really excited. She went back to her doctor, and this was really upset me. Went in and sat down with the doctor, and she says, he says, how you doing? She says, I'm not taking insulin anymore. He said, what? She says, I'm not taking insulin anymore. She said, how did you do that? Herbs. And he threw her clipboard at her and said, fine. I hope you have a happy life. Threw her out of the office. A doctor. My wife got sick. She ended up with hepatitis C of the liver. And unfortunately, somebody was looking over us, because I got a newsletter or a booklet from Sam Beiser.
That's right.
And it says, here's what you need to do to help the liver. Now, we'd gone to Ogden, Utah, and she'd had a gallbladder attack. Never before had a gallbladder attack. And so we went to the hospital because she was in excruciating pain. And they said, well, it's just a gallbladder attack. And so they took care of it, said just wait a while and don't eat anything and drink lots of water, and they gave her some kind of a sedative. So a little later, her liver started hurting her. In fact, the whole right side of her body was so sore she couldn't even lay on it. And so we went to the doctor, one in Idaho Falls, and then we went to one in Pocatello, and they all said, they took some tests, blood tests, and her enzymes were high. And they said, well, she's got hepatitis C eventually. And we said, what is that? So that's kind of one where I can't remember if it's chronic or acute, but it's one where it takes a long time to degenerate, and there's just they said there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. And we said, well, what's the long-term diagnosis? And they said liver transplant. And so that kind of scared us both. Well, then she had another gallbladder attack, and so they wanted to take out her gallbladder. We went to every hospital in Idaho and Utah, and they all said the same thing. And so we went to a doctor, as a liver specialist in Pocatello, and he says, we've got to do a biopsy of that liver. And she had a friend that had the same thing done, a biopsy, and they'd hit his spleen. It almost killed him. And so we said, absolutely not. And that's when we got the newsletter. And so I said, Chris, let's try a liver flush. And that was the one with the garlic, the olive oil, and the juice. Mm-hmm. And we did that for 5 days, and she had, when she went to the bathroom, she had things like peas coming out of her. And it kind of scared her a little bit. And she said, well, I haven't eaten any peas. What could that be? We got reading the material and found out probably gallstones or liver stones or whatever. Anyway, her liver started getting better, and in 3 days, no pain at all. And so that's really what got me interested in the herbs. So I started thinking, well, if that's going to work and these doctors can't do anything with a liver, well, then we ought to start investigating these herbs. And so I started taking them. I hadn't had, well, when I was about 21, I had half my stomach removed from ulcers. And I'd always had indigestion and heartburn. I couldn't even hardly drink water without getting heartburn. And so as we started on vegetables and fruits and stuff, things started to really pick up. And I could sleep at night, wouldn't have to get up in the middle of the night with taking soda and all that stuff. Even though I'd given up half my stomach, it still came back. I'll tell you what I really believe. I believe that there's a groundswell in this country that doctors cannot take care of people anymore. There's so many different sicknesses, they just don't know what to do. And I really believe that herbs are on the rise, and I think that's a salvation to mankind. And I think if we don't get into herbs, we're going to be completely wiped out as a human race. I really believe that with the viruses and the bacteria and the different degenerative diseases. With all my heart, I believe that, and I think this is the way to go. God put it here for us to take care of ourselves.
My name is Rita Rose Freeland, and I'm currently living in Gallup, New Mexico. What I would like to share is my husband. He's Navajo Indian, full-blooded Navajo Indian, and he's diabetic, which is a disease that is rampant amongst Native American people for different reasons, primarily because of the diet that they have been existing on for quite some time. My husband, his name is Daniel, I'll refer to him as Daniel. His blood sugar has been in the 400s for quite some time. They've been playing with the different medications to see if they can bring the blood sugar down. Myself, I had never been close to anyone with diabetes, so I began studying about it to learn more about it, to see what we could do. He's not on insulin shots, he's on the insulin tablets or the pills. His diet has been atrocious, and it's been very difficult for me to watch him eating in a way that I know has been very detrimental to his health and also contributing to that. I've always been more into health and so forth, but I wasn't able to convince him. And he was, the doctors were not able to bring his blood sugar down with the pills, and decided that it was time for him to take the injections, the insulin shots. That seemed to be the key that jolted him enough to make a change. And it was right at that time when another family member of mine talked to us about Dr. Schulze. So it was perfect timing also, and we immediately got the products, and he started them. He quit smoking, he quit drinking coffee, he started the herbal programs, and started eating a lot of vegetables and carrot juice and so forth. He has made a complete turnaround. I am so thrilled. It's prayers being answered for me. His blood sugar, which was in 400s, as I said, has dropped down to anywhere from in the upper 80s to in the hundreds, lower hundreds. He's feeling better than he has felt in a long time. I don't think he can remember how long it's been since he's felt this well. His mother died from diabetes, his father died from diabetes. He has 10 siblings, of which half of them have all gone to diabetes. And another reason why I feel this is so exciting, besides feeling that I'm going to have my husband with us for a much longer period of time now, is that we work a lot with the community back home. And as I said, diabetes is rampant among the Native American people. So I'm feeling very happy that we're going to be able to share this as a living testimony with other people there. So as his wife, I love him dearly. He's a very good man. I'm just so happy, and I'm so thankful. I am so thankful to Dr. Schulze for what he has done, the difference that he has made in my husband's life, and also in my life, and also in our children's life.
My name is Barbara Humphreys, and I'm from Neptune Beach, Florida. And my story is I've had endometriosis all my life, or since my 20s. It's just gotten worse as time has gone by. Now that I'm in my 40s, during that time of the month, I have to practically, for the first few days, just stay in bed, because as soon as I stand up, I'm just losing tons of clots by the handsful. And the only solution to that from my doctor, my gynecologist, was to have the uterus removed. That was the only solution that they could give. And my mother and father had gotten the Save Your Life tapes from Sam Beiser that I watched, and then I ordered some of his female formula and started trying that. And it worked the first month. I had no clots. The pain was gone, my PMS symptoms, mood swings. I didn't expect the extra things. I was looking for help for that. This crusade has been wonderful for me. I love Dr. Schulze. He's my hero. I would do anything for him.
My name is